I get itchy scrolling through endless listings of machine torches, each one promising industrial-grade heat and precision control, but every time you finally get one in your hands it feels like you bought a toy. I've spent the last few weeks actually swapping out my old torch for a brand new replacement, testing it on a couple of hobby projects, a repair job for a friend's vintage motorcycle, and even a quick job in the shop where I need to bend a few copper tubes. The thing that keeps most of us from making a mistake is knowing which claims actually hold up once the flame's lit. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The Miller 257464 XT60M is the short body, 25-foot version you'll see on a lot of Miller store pages, and it's marketed as a direct replacement for the original XT60M torch you might have seen on older workbenches. At first glance the packaging looks exactly like what you'd expect from a reputable brand: sturdy cardboard, a clear picture of the torch, and a short note about high-temperature performance. What matters, though, is what happens when you actually hook it up to your air supply and start using it. First off, the connection is straightforward. The torch takes a standard 1/4-inch air hose, and the quick connect fitting clicks into place with a satisfying snap. I was relieved not to wrestle with any odd adapters, something that trips up a lot of people when they buy a replacement that isn't truly compatible with their existing setup. Once I turned on the compressor, the torch ignited instantly, and the flame settled into a focused, almost needle-thin tip. That's the kind of reliability you need when you're trying to heat a small pipe in a cramped engine bay and can't afford to waste time fiddling with a finicky ignition system. What really sets this torch apart in everyday use is the balance between heat output and fuel consumption. In my tests, the short body kept the weight low enough that I could hold it steady for a few seconds without my arm getting tired. That matters when you're doing something like softening the ends of a stainless steel conduit to slide a fitting over it. The flame stayed hot enough to bend the metal in under 10 seconds, which is on par with what you'd expect from a higher-priced unit. At the same time, the gas flow didn't feel wasteful. I could run the torch for about 15 minutes on a half tank before the flame started to flicker. For a shop that does a lot of intermittent heating rather than long draw runs, that efficiency translates directly into lower operating costs. Now, no tool is without its trade-offs, and the XT60MS design does reveal a couple of practical quirks. Because the body is shorter than some of the longer-reach models, you lose a bit of leverage when you need to work in tight spaces that require the torch to angle sharply. I found myself having to adjust my grip more often than I would with a longer torch, especially when I was heating a pipe that was tucked behind a bracket. It's not a deal-breaker, but it's something to keep in mind if you regularly work inside tight engine compartments. Another point that came up during a quick durability check is the tip wear. The torch uses a replaceable copper tip, which is standard, but after a few hours of heavy use the tip started to show a slight discoloration at the edge of the flame. That's a normal sign of heat exposure, but the tip isn't cheap to replace on its own. If you're planning to run the torch for many hours a week, say, in a metal fabrication shop, where you're constantly heating rods and plates, you'll want to factor in the cost of replacement tips over the life of the unit. For occasional hobby use, the original tip will last just fine. Who should consider buying the Miller XT60M? If you're a DIY enthusiast who needs a reliable torch for occasional pipe bending, small-scale soldering, or quick heat shrink jobs, this model hits a sweet spot between price and performance. Its ease of hookup, steady flame, and manageable weight make it an excellent starter torch for someone building a home workshop. It also works well for professionals who already have a good air compressor setup and need a spare torch that won't break the bank, but can still handle the occasional repair call. On the other side of the ledger, you might want to skip this torch if you're looking for a high-precision, long-reach tool for heavy industrial tasks. The shorter body limits how far the flame can extend without moving your hand, and the tip durability issue becomes more pronounced when you're heating thick steel sections night after night. In those scenarios, a larger, purpose-built torch with a more robust tip system and a longer body would likely pay off in the long run. One practical strength that's easy to overlook is the way the torch handles after use cooling. After I turned it off, the body stayed warm for a minute or two, but it didn't stay.